Talking surprising race car sounds, dirty air and more with F1 sound design team. Sound editor Ol Nelson and re-recording mixer Gary Rizzo share their long history working with director Joseph Kosinski. When F1 sound editor Ol Nelson and re-recording mixer Gary Rizzo joined director Joseph Kosinski's bold and action-packed F1, they had a few advantages working in their favor to help them tackle the challenge. First, they have many decades of experience, and 3 Oscars. Between them, second, they had previously worked with Kosinski, and third, they were involved early. I started on working with Joe on Tron Legacy even before they officially had the green light on that, says Rizzo. We did some proof of concepts and we got on really well, became friends very quickly, and so I did Tron Legacy and then we moved on to other films that Joe's made, Oblivion and Only the Brave. We've done 6 of them at Skywalker Sound over the years. So it's been a 15-year relationship. At the end of each film, Joe has an idea of usually what he would like to do next. So he dropped a couple of little hints and mentioned F1 at one point. And, you know, that's one of the most exciting soundscapes you can imagine. Nelson agrees that Kosinski usually has at least 1 or 2 waiting in the wings, and first heard about the possibility of a drama about Formula One racing while he was working on Spiderhead. Joe was at Skywalker Sound and said he had this really exciting idea about Formula One, and our colleague Juan Peralta, who can't be here, is a huge F1 fan. Juan and Gary were the re-recording mixers, and so it got us all buzzing. The wonderful thing about having that relationship with Joe is that not only do we hear about it, but he gets us involved and invested very early on. So we were in early script phase and Joe was always eager to get us the script, get our ideas, and then get us to collaborating as early as possible. So even before they were shooting, we were already concocting opportunities for recording and playing with futzing and whatever we could do to help get ahead of the film. And it gave us this time to get the creative juices flowing. We're really grateful to Joe for being that proactive and that collaborative with us. Gold Derby spoke with the 2 key members of F1's sound design team on our recent Meet the Experts Spotlight panel to discuss surprising race day and track sounds, the unique sound challenges of the film, and having driver Lewis Hamilton on board as a producer and expert source. Gold Derby: is that relatively standard to be involved early on, or does it totally depend on the film and the director? Ol Nelson: at Skywalker, we're fortunate that we have a lot of existing relationships, going back to Ben Burt and Gary Ridstrom where, you know, Ben was tapped by George Lucas and before they had shot anything, he was talking about light swords and things like that. So it is a tradition that we have. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes things are just fast and furious and different filmmakers approach sound differently. But that's always our preference, to get involved with the script, because then you can start discussing sound ideas before they even start shooting. Then you can, especially from Gary's perspective, you can think about things like, how are we going to capture this in a proactive way so that we don't have to do a lot of ADR? Rizzo: yeah, obviously the earlier that you can wrap your head around the film, the better. Production was great in getting Ol and crew to be able to travel to some of these locations, to some of these races, to be able to capture these Formula One cars. They're very expensive to run and these racing environments are not quiet. There's music playing, there's crowds playing, they're complicated environments, but production was generous enough to try and get our crew involved early to be able to dive in to get as much as they could, as cleanly as they could. With all those challenges of those races, the key was to be able to get in on some of these recordings of other environments like tire tests and things like that. I don't know if everybody knows the story really, but ultimately, we have a real race going on, but our actors, although we're in a Formula One environment, the cars they were actually driving were Formula 2 cars, which sound a bit different. They're built differently, so essentially our crew had to be able to get clean enough recordings that we could essentially replace those cars. We were essentially doing ADR sessions for these cars to make them sound exactly like a Formula One car would. Joe's always after authenticity and trying to make it not only as immersive of an experience as possible, but as authentic and real of a situation as the audience could possibly experience. What was the most surprising sound that you discovered that was part of the F1 experience that you didn't maybe expect? Nelson: as someone who was familiar with Formula One, but hadn't ever really done the deep dive, it is overwhelming, very cool and very exciting. There are only 20 drivers in the world who drive these cars at any Grand Prix. There are a few others waiting in the wings and there are things moving up and down, but there are 20 professional Formula One drivers driving for 10 professional teams with 4 different engines. These cars require almost like a NASA-level communication and engineering system to operate them. It's not just, put the keys in and drive. And so these Formula One environments are full of very high-tech people doing very high-tech things. As we were getting started on this film, I'm thinking we're going to have to record some Formula One cars, not realizing that Formula One cars only drive at Formula One events. You can't take one out on a Tuesday morning to a track and just light it up. So we had certain restrictions, and then also, as Gary mentioned, they're incredibly expensive. These teams, the Mercedes and Red Bull and Williams and Ferrari and McLaren, they all take very good care of their cars because that is how they're going to win. It's down to milliseconds sometimes. So when we say, we'd like to get in on your car and put a recorder or put a microphone in there, I think, no way. So there were all these complications, and Formula One was very accommodating in letting us get out there, and our producer, Lewis Hamilton, was very proactive in accommodating and getting us out there. You asked, is there anything surprising, and it's such a plethora of sounds happening simultaneously. You have cars going 200 miles an hour down the straight, while you also have cars pulling into the pit stops, doing these whole pit events in 2 to 3 seconds. You've got cars in the garage revving. You've got helicopters and the PA. We were going for with specificity. Also, surprise number one, you get in Lewis Hamilton's garage and he starts up that car, and it is the most powerful thing you'll ever hear, but transporting and translating that experience of starting an F1 car in the garage to an IMAX and Atmos environment was a whole other level of process and recording and getting various levels and handing it off to Juan and Gary. And you hear things that you don't think about when you're watching it on TV, like the curves. They go around these curves and you get this amazing BRR sound. So many really cool events that as you get into that environment, you hone in on them and you think, I need to go down to turn 3 and get that. Or, I need to get the sound of them hitting the limiter as.